Hello. This study, I want us to conclude the cost of capital. Still looking at Wacc, but most of the discussions we'll be having today will be more theoretical, but in the later parts we'll do a bit of calculation, which is very minor. Yeah, but this part is also very important. But if you remember what I said about finance management paper, you need to know more than calculation. You need to understand the theoretical part of things and also be able to interpret your computation. So today I want to talk about three things we're going to touch. We're going to touch the impact of gearing on Wacc. We're going to speak about assets and equity beta. We'll do a little calculation on that, but I need you to understand it when I explain it. And we're going to look at how to choose whether a project specific Wacc, which is theory as well, or you use the company's Wacc for cost of capital. Yeah, so these are the three things I want us to touch in this video, and I will start with gearing and Wacc. What is gearing? Gearing only shows how much debt a company has. It's about how much debt you have. Sometimes you now say relative to total capital. And remember, the total capital means equity and debt. Yeah, equity and debt. That's the total capital. But our focus now is the volume of debt. How much debt do you have? Yeah, which is your gearing. And how does that affect your Wacc as a company? That's what we want to look at. And in this, we'll be looking at three theories. The first one is a traditional theory, because that people said different things about the impact of debt on Wacc. Remember, we know that Wacc is weighted average cost of capital, which means is weighting debt, is weighting equity, and all of that together. However, there has been different views on how this can even affect Wacc beyond the simple calculation that we are doing. And the first theorist is a traditional theory. And what is traditional theory? What do they say? That is probably the most popular theory, and which personally I align with, because there are two more theories we're going to look at. The other two, you need to know the three of them for exam's sake, but in the practical sense of things, if you ask me my view, I am more aligned with the traditional theory. Yeah. And what is it saying? I will just explain it with a graph, because that is actually the easiest way to understand this and also not to forget it. Yeah. So if I put x-axis as the volume of debt and cost of capital, on the y-axis. Yeah. So what traditional theory is saying is that, let's say this is a line for your debt. So debt is going up. You try to increase your debt, keep increasing your debt. What happens to the cost? Your cost of debt stays constant, but at the point it struggles and cannot stay constant again, because your risk will go up as an entity, and you expect banks to naturally increase your cost of debt. So your cost of debt cannot remain constant for life. So what he's saying is that initially your cost of debt will remain constant, but at the point when it gets in too much, it will go up. Yeah. And initially, when your cost of debt is constant, what happens to cost of equity? The shareholders will start feeling uncomfortable for sure. Yeah, they will start feeling uncomfortable because debt is less risky and equity is more risky, right? So because equity is for the shareholders, when your debt is going up, first of all, the interest expense will go up, which means that the profit after tax will reduce, so they won't get enough dividends. And as well, if peradventure there is a liquidation, the shareholders know that because your debt has gone up so much, they are afraid that they will probably get so much dividend or so much payback from their investment, because most of the recoverable amount from liquidation will go to the debt holders. And because of that, the risk of equity will go up, and the higher the risk, the higher the reward. So which means cost of equity will keep going up as debt is increasing. And it gets to a point where it now goes up very fast, not slowly like it's been going initially like this. It goes pretty fast at the point that is getting so unbearable. And this is cost of equity line. This is your cost of debt line. And looking at this, you can see where WACC will stay. At this point, debt is equals to 0. So WACC will be equals to cost of equity. But as it starts to increase your debt, then WACC will start to come down, because cost of debt is expected to be lower than, as you can see, it's lower than cost of equity, right? So, and that will reduce your WACC until the point where the cost of debt is now going up astronomically, and WACC will also want to kick up. So you can see WACC starts going up here. So at this point, what traditional theory is saying in summary is that there are two effects, and that's why I'm breaking in that at that point where you have before the cost of debt start going up. So this place is called the substitution effect, because the cost of debt is substituting the expensive cost of equity, so thereby making the WACC to be lower. And at this point, it is the financial risk, because at this point where there is financial risk, cost of debt has gone so high that WACC has also gone so high. And because of that, you say the cost of equity has also gone super high. So cost of equity gone high, cost of debt gone high, you expect WACC to also go high. So that is what traditional theory is talking about. So you can see that it's pretty similar to what you would expect based on your understanding of risk and reward. And that's why I also personally align with that, because at this point, I expect the cost of equity to go so high when the cost of debt has now gone so high, because already the shareholders, they're never comfortable even at this point. But when cost of debt has now even made it so worse, then they become definitely super uncomfortable. That's traditional theory. Now let's look at the second one, which is M&M theory. M&M is the name of two guys called the Modigliani and Miller. Modigliani and Miller, M&M. And this guy came with two theories, which is what we're going to be looking at. But the first theory is M&M without tax. And this is called without tax because of the assumptions they made here. So they made about a couple of assumptions, which I'm going to mention to you now. The first assumption is that there's no tax benefit on debt, which is very wrong, but that's the assumption. They realize it's wrong, and that's why they brought the third assumption, the third theory. But listen, because you need to know and understand this. They also assume that there's no transaction cost. They assume that debt is risk-free. That is not also true, but that is their own assumption in those years when they came up with it. They believe that a company can collect as much debt as they want, so unlimited debt. And they even believe that profit retention is zero, so that a company will always pay out all its profit as dividend. All of this, I don't agree. But this is all they believe is going on in the finance space and funding. And what do you think their graph will look like? Still looking at debt on this axis, cost of capital on this axis. They believe that cost of debt will remain constant for life, never changes. Unlike this one that is going to change at this point. They don't believe that it will never change. They also believe that cost of equity will keep going up, which is okay. We agree with that as well. Cost of equity. However, they believe that WACC will remain constant for life. That is the assumptions, and quite very faulty, but it's important you know what they are talking about. So this is not, for me, appropriate, and they too, they realized it's not appropriate, and they came up with the third theory, which is now M&M with tax. And this slightly looks a bit closer to the traditional theory, apart from the substitution part of it. That is not there, but it's not, I mean, substitution is there, but the financial risk is still not there. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So they agree that there's a substitution effect, which means that if you look at the graph with the tax now, yeah, the cost of debt, they still believe is going to remain constant anyway. Yeah. And they believe that cost of equity will still be going up, which is consistent anyway with all the other two theories. However, now they've agreed that there is a tax benefit. That's what has changed. There is tax benefit on debt. And because there is tax benefit on debt, cost of debt will be cheaper, and they agree that weighted average cost of capital will keep coming down. Right. So they believe that weighted average cost of capital will keep coming down, and they advise that take as much debt as you can take. Yeah. The only thing that is different from all these assumptions, yeah, and this one is just the tax that they've accepted. They still believe that all these assumptions is still standing except this one. Yeah. So those are the three theories and how Wacc and gearing can be tested in your exams. And I hope that is clear. And let's go to the second part that I want us to talk about, which is about asset and equity beta. So let's look at asset and equity beta. What does this mean? It's very important you understand this as well. Yeah, remember when we spoke about CAPM, we said CAPM is such a fantastic model to calculate cost of equity because it takes into consideration risk versus reward. And the element we use to measure this risk is called the beta. It's a beta because that is the way we measure the volatility of return. Now the question is, this beta, when is it appropriate and what type of beta is appropriate? So there are two types of beta. There is asset beta and there is equity beta. And what is the meaning of asset beta? Asset beta is also called the ungeared beta, while equity beta is called the geared beta. Yeah. And what are we talking about here? What we are saying here is that the beta, this is a beta without financial risk, which means the beta when there is no debt, without debt, no gearing, without debt, very important. Or you say is the beta that consider only business risk. Only business risk. Because that's the beta that is unavoidable. If you are going into a particular business, there's nothing you can do about it. You'll be exposed to that business area. Take, for instance, you want to start a banking, you are exposed to the financial sector risk. There's nothing you can do. Yeah? Whereas the geared beta is the beta that consider both the financial risk and business risk. So this is a full beta, and this is what you must always use for your calculation. Equity beta is a full, complete, that's another way I can say it to you, it's a complete beta because that consider all forms of both the financial risk and the business risk. However, if a company does not have debt, yeah, so a company without debt, There's nothing you can do about it. If the company has no debt, that company does not have financial risk. And in that case, the asset beta will be equals to equity beta. Yeah, because there is no debt. If that company does not have debt, but it's very unlikely. Now, how does this apply in the real world? And which is the way it can be tested actually. Usually this is going to be tested when you have company A. Say this company A is a tech. Let's say this is a Google. Yeah? Google. Yeah? A tech company wants to invest. Yeah? This company has identified a potential investment in banking sector. These are two different sectors, banking and tech. Two different sectors. So which means the business risk here is different from the business risk here. So the business risk here is banking risk, whereas the business risk here is tech risk. So which means the beta you have here for Google cannot be used to assess this opportunity. You cannot use it because there is a part of this beta that is tech business risk that you cannot use for banking business risk. And what do you have to do? It means that Google will need to go look for a company, yeah, maybe a bank that is already playing in this sector, in a banking sector that Google wants to go into, and get the asset beta. So get the asset beta of that banking, then apply it to Google, yeah, bring it to Google, then add the financial risk of Google, so that you can now have what you will call the equity beta that you can use as your way to calculate cost of capital. And this time around, I know we're talking about cost of equity, which eventually you will use in your Wacc calculation. Yeah, so that is the flow, and I think the best way is to solve a question now, and that probably gives a bit of flavor to what we're talking about. So let's look at this question. Yeah, let's look at this question. BJCO. Yeah, BJCO. BJCO is a profitable company which is financed by equity with a market value of $180 million and by debt with a market value of $45 million. The company is considering an investment project which is diversification into a new business area. You can see he wants to go into a new business area, a company that already operates in that new business, the GZCO. Now, BJ has been able to identify a GZCO company that's already playing in that business. Yeah. So, and that GZCO has an equity beta of 1.5, finance 75% equity, yeah, with market value 90 million and 25% debt with market value of 30 million. Tax is paid 1 year in arrears at an annual rate of 30%. Now we have risk-free rates of return, equity risk premium. We're asked to calculate the cost of equity for the project. To calculate cost of equity for this project, remember I want to do BJCO now. Cost of equity is CAPM, and we're going to use this formula plus beta into RM minus RF. Now, we need to use the appropriate beta. Right? Equity premium is 6%. They've given us that. The RF is 4%. They've given us that. So where the work is using the appropriate beta. Now, the question has given us a lot of beta, but do we have the beta for the project? Because we are asked to calculate the project specific cost of equity. So we must be using the beta specific for that project. Now, looking at this project, We need to look at this project from two perspectives: the business risk and the financial risk. Financial risk is the gearing, which is the capital structure of BJCO, the way BJCO will finance the project. Because the BJCO has not said it will finance it in a different way. But we know that the BJCO usually finances their business, their project, with market value of equity 180 and debt is this. So we know that capital structure, the percentage. So we can get that percentage of equity and debt. So we know that capital structure of BJCO, which is what they will use for this project that we are talking about. So it's equity of 180 over 225, which is what percentage is that? 180 divided by 225. That's 80%. And debt is 45 over 225, which is equals to 45 divided by 225, equals to 20%. So this is the capital structure. So that is the financial risk of BJCO of that, which is the same of that project, 80% and 20%. So it's 80-20. We are fine with that. But for business risk, the business risk is not the same business risk that's a BJCO. It's a business risk in GZ. It's GZ code that has the business risk that we are looking for, right? Unfortunately, if you look at the beta that we have, the equity beta that we have for GZ code, is equity beta that has also considered the business risk and financial risk of GZ code. But look at GZ code. GZ code is financed 75%, 25%. So the capital structure is different. So we cannot use this 1.5. We have to remove the capital structure of 75-25 from 1.5 before we can calculate what we need. And how do we do that? That is why you need to know this formula. This formula says that the asset beta, which is the beta without financial structure, beta without gearing, beta without financial risk, is equals to volume of equity. Very important to know this formula, please. Very, very important. It's a simple formula. I always tell my students, once you practice a lot of these questions, you will not have to memorize formulas. Both those you'll be given in the exam as well. As volume of equity plus volume of debt into bracket 1 minus t. Then multiply by equity beta. Just know this formula. This is the only formula you need to know. So you can rearrange it to calculate beta equity or use it to calculate the beta asset. So now that we know the beta equity of GZ to be 1.5, now we need to do what, in fact, let me just name it before I write it. So the first step we want to do is, number one, is to de-gear that equity beta, which means we want to remove the financial risk. So remove the financial risk, because what we want is the asset beta of that industry, the business risk of that industry. So we want to remove, excuse me, we need to remove the gearing. That's called the gear. So we are removing the financial risk. So we want to remove the capital structure so that we know that the beta that we have is a clean beta that only represents the business risk in the industry that GZ is operating. So which means the beta asset of that industry equals to volume of X. So we'll now be using the financial structure that is inside of that 1.5 beta equity that we want to de-gear. And that financial structure that is inside of it is 75-25. So we need to take that away. So volume of equity is 75%. I'll just do it as 75. You can always use it like that. You will have your answer correct. 25 into 1 minus tax rate is 30%. And that equals to 75 divided by, so 25 times 0.7 plus 75. And so that's 92.5 times 1.5. So beta asset equals to 75 divided by 92.5 multiplied by 1.5, and that is 1.22. So So the asset beta is 1.22. So which means this is the asset beta that represents the business risk of the project that we want to deal with. But remember, this asset beta is not sufficient. It's not enough. Yeah, we need more. We need a full beta to use, which is the equity beta. Yeah, but then we need to get the equity beta, we need to gear back, which means we now need to add back the financial risk. So we want to add the correct financial risk. Yeah, which is 80/20, because that is our own company. We fund by 80/20, and that means we now still use the same formula that says beta asset equals to volume of equity into bracket volume of equity plus volume of debt into bracket 1 minus t times beta equity. Now we want to calculate this beta equity, but we know the beta asset is now 1.22, so 1.22 equals to volume of equity is 80 over 80 plus volume of debt is 20 into 1 minus 30% multiplied by beta equity that we want to get. So beta equity now equals to 0.7 times 20 plus 80, that's 94. 80 divided by 94, that's 0.85. So that's 1.22 divided by 0.85. So the whole of this is 0.85. Yeah, so beta equity equals to 1.22 divided by 0.85, and that gives us 1.43. So beta equity is 1.43, and that is what we now need to use in our cost of equity that we want to calculate using CAPM, which says that RF plus beta into RM minus RF. So which equals to RF is 4%, it's been given, plus 1.43 into RM minus RF is the premium already, so we don't need to stress too much. It's been given 6%, and that gives us 4% plus 1.43 times 6%. If you do that, times 6 plus 4, that gives us 12.6%. And that is the project-specific cost of equity that we have been asked to do. So that is the way gearing and ungearing works. So just think about it. Gearing means that you are adding back the financial risk. Ungearing means that you are removing the financial risk. And if you have a company that doesn't have debt at all, it means that equity is 100%. And the whole of this formula will make sure that beta asset equals to beta equity if equity is 100%, because this will be 0. And 100 divided by 100 will equals to 1, and beta asset equals to beta equity for company that doesn't have debt. Please take note. And lastly, how do you know what is appropriate? I wanted to touch on that quickly. When to use project-specific Wacc or company Wacc? Yeah, just need to know that company Wacc can also be used. Yeah, if you meet certain criteria, there's some conditions that you need to know. Yeah, because what we are saying here is, if you want to calculate whether to do a project or an investment or not, you will be calculating a cost of debt, a Wacc that is specific to that particular project, or you can just adopt the Wacc of an entire company. The first condition is you are only allowed to adopt the company's Wacc if the project is so small. Yeah, project is small, that is tiny, right? So tiny that you don't need to be stressing yourself calculating a new Wacc. Just adopt the company's overall Wacc. Yeah. Another one is if the funding structure is the same as the overall company structure, then you can adopt the same company's Wacc. You don't need to necessarily start calculating a new WACC for the project, because it's always 80-20, and you believe that you're still going to use the 80-20 in your project funding, 80 debt, 20 equity, or whatever. So if it's the same percentage, the same structure, you can adopt the same. The other way is that if the risk is similar, risk is similar, so which means the risk the company is facing is the same thing as the risk the project is going to be facing. Not like you are in a banking sector, you want to go to a tech, you can't use company's WACC. You need to use a project-specific WACC, and that's why you need to get a better specific for that project. So but if the risk is similar, the funding structure is similar, the project is small, if any of this is met, then you can use company's WACC. You are allowed to use a company's WACC. In that case, you don't need to calculate specific WACC for that project. And that will be it for cost of capital. Remember, ask questions, like the videos, comment, and I'm here to help. Thank you for listening.